Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I've been wanting to try a couple of floral techniques on the gel plate, so I actually went to Dollar Tree and got some artificial flowers because I don't really have any real ones handy, and I don't really love the idea of picking and killing flowers for no good reason. If you happen to have some on hand, or if you have a bouquet or something like that, obviously do whatever you like, but for me the silk ones were going to be just fine, so that's what I did. I ended up getting 3 different types. So I've got like 2 daisy style ones, and I don't really know what those little guys are there, but I just basically was going for a little bit of variety in size and shape just to give this technique a try. I've seen other people do it, I've never done it myself. And my goal here is going to be to get those printed on the plate and then to hand paint them and see how that turns out. So what I'm doing now is just laying down a nice base to print the flowers in, and this was just a mix of sap green and green gold, which is one of my favorite colors. The sap green was just a little bit too deep and intense and blue, so when I added the green gold to it, it kind of just gave me a nice lighter color, which is exactly what I was looking for. So in addition to this experiment, I'm also going to do a little on my smaller square plate. I'm going to just do some completely hand-painted flowers just to see how it turns out. I'm not doing anything in any kind of great detail or with any kind of realism in mind, just kind of getting some abstract flowers down just to see what I could do with the idea to possibly then just be able to cut and tear them up and use them as, of course, some collage material. As you know, I love doing that. So for this right now that I've got the wet paint on the plate, I'm just going in and kind of arranging the flowers in whatever pattern or way that kind of hits my eye at the moment. And I'm filling in any of the gaps with these little ones here, which kind of worked out to be the perfect size for doing that. So what I will say about doing this is it's kind of hard to get the petals all pressed down exactly how you want them because there are layers of petals and they kind of move around a little bit when you do it. But if you're not too particular about that, which I'm not, because again, I'm going for more of kind of an abstract look, and plus this is all going to be cut up for collage material anyway, so nothing has to be perfect. You definitely could be a little more fiddly with it if you wanted to and get it to line up perfectly and have everything lay flat and get a very crisp, clear print. But honestly, for what I ended up with here, I don't really think it was too bad for just kind of laying it down and kind of gently pressing it. Now I do decide to go in with just a sheet of copy paper and pick up what I can of some of that green laying around the edge. Plus, it gives me a little bit more of a surface to press down even harder with the flowers that are on there without kind of making a mess. They're not really sliding as much when I do that, and I'm not getting paint all over my hands, which doesn't bother me at all, but it does if I'm going to then be redepositing it on something, because that's really not what I want to happen. Here I tried to go in with a brayer and flatten them down, but that really wasn't working out too well. Wouldn't recommend that, but that's when I decided to go in with the copy paper and just kind of press down, just see what I could come up with. I'm not obviously going to be using that paper for anything. There are stems, the plastic stems on those, and it's making holes in the paper, which is just fine. Again, I'm just kind of doing this to pick up a little bit of that extra green around the flowers to be able to get a little bit of a crisper outline around each of the petals. Now I'm just going to remove the flowers, and I have the imprints down there, and what I did was just immediately plop those into a container of water, and that actually got all of the paint off. I had no issue, and I dried them out and was able to reuse them again. So off camera, I went ahead and mixed some colors that I wanted to use for these. So there are various shades of yellow, and I have some pinks and blues and white on there that I kind of just go in and mix as I'm doing it, just to kind of get different tones and lay things down that I think might look nice. Again, I've never done this before, so I don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. This piece is just an experiment to see what happens. And then when this is done, what I'll do is study the print that I get and kind of see what happened, knowing what I did, and therefore I should be able to make a determination as to how I might want to do the next one differently to get a different result. At this point in the process, I had kind of planned to use my pickup color as just the matte gel medium because I was planning on just having a clear background, and that's not actually what I ended up doing, and I'm glad I made the decision that I made at the end because I think it turned out pretty cool. I did end up using the matte gel on the smaller piece where I just hand painted some loose flowers on my other plate, which you'll see here in a little bit, but I really like the way that this one ended up turning out, and I'm not going to ruin the surprise, so just stick around and you'll see what I ended up using. One thing to keep in mind when you're doing this is, as with any gel print, although sometimes it's hard to remember it when you're doing something that you're actually hand painting, whatever color goes down first is going to be the color that you see at the front of the print. So what I'm trying to do here is get some darker colors near the base right at the center of the flower, and then I'm kind of working lighter outwards to create a little bit of visual depth. Again, I'm not going for any sort of hyper-realism or anything here, but that is the way that that would look in nature. You're going to anything that is deeper and recedes appears to be darker. So I'm trying to go in with those darker colors to kind of give the idea of that depth there. Here I'm using a little bit of, I believe that is the neon pink. The blue color that I used was a mixture of Winsor and Newton. I'm going to have to check on that. It's Winsor blue, Winsor and Newton's Galleria Winsor blue, and Artist Loft turquoise, and I mixed a little bit of blue in with that too. And as far as the yellow goes, I used a combination of Naples yellow and what is this? This is just a cadmium yellow medium that I used. I think I mixed a tiny bit of the Winsor and Newton pale olive in with that blue too. The one up at the top and the bottom, the smaller flowers, just to give you an idea of some of the colors that I used there. But I'm still going in and trying to shade in reverse, which is a little bit tricky and kind of messes with your mind a little bit. But again, I was just kind of experimenting with this piece, so I don't really care what happened necessarily. I was just trying to see what was going to happen so that I knew how to adjust in the future. So because I was hand painting that on there, the paint is fairly thick in a lot of areas. You can see as I'm lifting it up here that it's still wet, and you can see where the heavier amounts of paint are. So I'm going to let that dry for a long time. My initial plan was to just let it dry for an hour or so, but I completely forgot all about it and ended up going to bed, and so it was nice and dry this morning when I woke up. But that's really what you want. You want to make sure everything is good and dry so that you can pick up a nice clear print without smudging anything. So I pulled out my little 6x6 inch plate here, and I'm just going in using the exact same colors that I already had out for the print on the left, because I had a good bit of them still squeezed out and didn't really want to waste them. So I'm going in with some straight Naples yellow there just to create some flower centers. Again, this is by no means meant to be anything even slightly realistic looking. I am just going in for abstract, quick, loose flowers, basically just for the sake of experimentation and seeing how this works. I've seen other artists do it. I've seen other YouTube artists do both of these techniques, but I've never tried it myself. And I just think it's I always thought it was pretty cool looking, and there's a lot of possibilities there. My work tends to go to the darker side typically, not just in color palette, but kind of in feel and mood. So I think it'll be interesting to add the floral element into that to see what I can come up with in the future. So I will probably be doing more of these kind of prints off camera just to get a collection of them, and we'll kind of see what we can come up with. Maybe in one of the next videos that I'll have coming up, I'll utilize some of these and we can see what we can make from them. But here I'm just going in with a little bit of that sap green and green gold mix, just putting in some loose little stems and kind of just going around the top of the center of the flower there just to give it a little bit more visual structure. And we're going to go in with the same blues and pinks that I used in the print on the left for the petals here in just a minute. I'm adding in some leaves to the stems and just a little bit of the idea of some grass down near the bottom, although I'm probably not going to end up actually using that bottom part anyway, because like I said, I'll be cutting this apart and mainly just focusing on the flower itself if I use it in any sort of collage. At this point, I have no idea how this is going to turn out. This is the one that I do end up using the matte gel medium with which to pick up the print. So it's going to be a little bit different from the one on the left when it's all done. So I'm going in with some of the mix of the, that was the fluorescent pink, and it's mixed with a little bit of white and also a little bit of light pink, which is a Winsor & Newton color as well. I just went ahead and mixed various amounts of those together to get a little bit of different shading and a little bit of different tones for the petals of the flowers. Again, kind of trying to go in remembering that the darker needs to be towards the front or the middle of the flower. That's something I'm going to have to practice because I kept forgetting what I was doing. It's almost like if any of you have ever done any watercolor painting, it's a different way of thinking about laying color down. If you're used to oil painting or acrylic painting, you kind of can go at it dark to light, but if you're doing watercolors, you have to always be cognizant of what is going to be the lightest part of your painting, because that needs to be kept light, or you paint the light on first, because with watercolor you can't put light on top of dark because of the nature of the paint itself. So this is kind of just, it's not the same, but it's also a different way of thinking about painting, because I have to paint the underside of the piece because that's what's going to be seen. So as I'm painting this, I'm kind of thinking about some applications for some of these flowers as far as collage would go, and I think it would be really interesting to do a whole series of sheets of these papers in the same color scheme, not necessarily all the same tones, but in just different cool blues, or maybe a mix of warm and cool blues, just for example, and cut all of those out and have either an entire canvas of just those kinds of tones in the flowers as a background, or maybe just a chunk of the background of a piece of mixed media just done in all of these flowers. And I just think it would be really cool. I kind of think that if you would use too many colors, it might, especially on a whole canvas, it might just end up being really busy, which you would probably not, it probably wouldn't look as good. So I think when I try this, I'm probably going to just make some sheets of all light colors and go from there. And actually, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm kind of thinking now that maybe shades of gray, flowers in shades of gray would actually be pretty cool, because it's kind of an unexpected thing. You typically see brightly colored flowers and they kind of invoke thoughts of spring and happiness. But what if you took that and, just to change it up a little bit, you took away those colors and what you had were shades of gray, you had black and you had white? It would really change the whole entire feel of the piece, I think, and give it a little bit of a gothic theme. I don't know. At any rate, I'll probably try doing that, so you'll get to see what comes of that at some point. So I should say here that before I do this next part, which is going in with the matte gel medium to pick up this piece on some tissue paper, I let this dry very thoroughly. I think I let this one dry overnight too, come to think of it. You can hit it with a hair dryer set on cool if you want to speed the process up. I do that all the time when I'm pulling prints, and it works perfectly. If you're having issues getting your prints to pull, it's probably because you're not allowing it to dry long enough. I've learned that the hard way. So I do recommend doing that. Just make sure it's on a cool setting, because if you use hot on the plate, it can damage your plate. After a lot of use, it'll warp it and make it not be able to get flat prints for you. But the cool setting will definitely work, or even better, just let it sit and dry on its own. Now that I've got the paper on there and have it pressed down and have let it dry, I'm going to go ahead and pull this up. And my intention was to do this on regular tissue paper, but it seems that I have grabbed the wet strength tissue paper because the force with which I am pulling this is not tearing it, so there's no way this is actually regular tissue paper here. I must have gotten them mixed up. There is a link to where I got the wet strength that's going to be in the description, as well as any of the other materials that I'm using in this video, and I also include any of the materials that I commonly use in all of my videos. That way everything is in one place, and if you saw another video and wanted to know what one of the materials was, you don't have to go back and hunt for that again. That's why I list the same ones on every video for you. But I thought the print pulled nicely, and I don't love it because I wasn't trying very hard for a great outcome. I was just experimenting, but it worked, which is most important here. So now I'm going back to the larger piece, and I flipped it over here so you can kind of get a sneak peek of what's going to come out of the print. And like I said, I left this dry overnight, so it is completely 100% dry. Now, having said that, I'm going to pan out here a little bit so you can see the whole entire plate there. You can see there in the middle there are some darker pink spots where the paint is extremely heavy, and there are spots like that all over because I applied it with a brush instead of using my brayer like I typically would. So there are large chunks on there. So I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to successfully pick all of that up, but it actually worked really well. And right here you can see I ended up deciding to use black to pick that up with because I just wanted to see what would happen. I was hoping it would be beautiful, and I was not disappointed. I used the matte gel medium on the last one, so it gave me a nice clear background. This is going to be interesting. I'm going to show you here in a minute because the dark against some of those bright colors of the flowers, it almost kind of has the feel of one of those velvet paintings from the 60s and 70s, which I thought were kind of cool in a totally cheesy way, of course. But it has that same feel to it. You'll see here in a minute when I pull this print, and I kind of really like it, and I'll probably end up using that again. So I'm going in again with the wet strength tissue paper, although I didn't realize it at the time, but that's definitely what that is. And I'm trying to not get too many wrinkles on it for this print, but I ended up getting some anyway, and you'll be able to kind of see them when I show you the print as I pull it up, but they don't really bother me. Again, if I'm going to be cutting this up and using it as collage paper, you're not going to be able to tell anyway. Chances are it's going to be going over another color or other textures, or possibly having other collage papers over top of it, so not a big deal. But if you are looking to have a nice clean print without any of the lines, be very, very careful with your tissue paper, or use maybe rice paper or some other type of paper to pick up that's not going to so easily cause those little creases and the veining in it. It didn't bother me, and it actually left some veining on the plate, which I then pulled up with a little bit of copper paint, which I thought was really cool, and I'll end up using that in another collage as well. So what I'm doing here is kind of going around all of the edges a little bit. I start trying to pull it up, but if you feel that one of your pieces is starting to stick, it's actually a good idea to release all of the edges before you peel it up, because that's where you're going to run into problems as far as tearing goes. Now, granted, I am, like I said, using the wet strength tissue here, so that really wasn't going to be too much of an issue, although that stuff will still tear. It's not completely impervious to that, but It's a lot stronger than the regular stuff. But if you just loosen up all of the edges there, that's where you're going to have the majority of your problems. And then just kind of very carefully pull while holding the plate down with your other hand. And I try not to hold too close to the top. Like the more that releases, I'll try to grab down a little further, closer to the piece, especially using the very the other tissue paper, the very fragile kind. But there is the print, and honestly, I think that's really cool. I love the way it looks. The flowers came out great. I love the bright colors against the black background, and I can just think of so many possibilities with this technique. So I'm going to put a piece of white paper underneath that so you can really see it. And I'll bring it up close to the camera for you, and I'm going to show you some close-up shots at the end here too of the individual flowers. But you can see the veining in there that came from the wrinkles in the paper. I don't mind it. I really, really like the way the black offsets the brightness of the flowers, and this is definitely going to be a technique that I use in the future. I can't wait to see what kind of final mixed media piece comes out of it. But I'm going to bring the other sheet back over now and show you the smaller one next to that, and then I'll bring you in to see some of the details. But I thank you all for hanging out with me again today as I experiment with this new technique for myself, and I encourage everybody to give it a try. And if you have not yet had a chance, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I put out a new video every Friday, and I've also been releasing a video short every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Eastern Time as well. My long form videos come out Friday at 10 a.m. But yeah, give me a like, and don't forget to turn on your bell notifications, because YouTube sometimes doesn't like to let people know I've put out a video, so you will always get notified by doing that. But thanks again for stopping in and hanging out with me today, and I hope you all have a great week. See you all next time.